Hello everyone, and welcome back to MUP Halo, another Halo show that's going to try and explain to you the weapon Cortana, and obviously you'll end up more confused than before. My name is Wiki Dave, and with me I've got my co-host James-005. How are you, James?
I'm good, thank you.
We're going to go through some news that dropped. Actually, no, I need my sound effect. I have to get used to using the sound of it. There we go. We're going to jump right into the news. So, the news that we're going to be talking about is actually a new graphic drop that happened on the Mantic Games shop that kind of gave us a bit of insight of what to expect. So I'm going to chuck it to James, and he's just going to dive right into the first thing that comes to mind when he saw that particular graphic. Now, the graphic will be the thumbnail, and it should be in this video if you're watching it on YouTube, but you can obviously see that on the Mantic Game website, and we'll obviously put a link below as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to set the scene for the listener. So it's a school holiday in the UK last week, and I've got up for work because I'm the only person in my household who doesn't work in education. So I get up and I see a message from Dave to say, "Have you seen this?" with a link to this image on Mantic's website. At which point I promptly get back into bed and start frantically messaging Dave, much to the annoyance of my partner. So, are you not going to work? No, there's important nerd news. So these are the things that struck me in the small hours of the morning in the UK while I was irritating my partner. So,
well, actually, we'll do the flip side of that. On my version of events, I was fighting with someone in Discord about how the weapon was always on as a pre-order bonus. Because there was a discussion about whether the Cortana or the weapon were what they were offering as a pre-order bonus, and I knew it was the weapon the entire time. So when I was like, screw this, I'm going to go get an image of it, and then I went to the Mantic website and I found that, and that's when I messaged James. So I was already out, because I mean, it was like on the flip side, 12 hours? I'm 12 hours ahead of you, so it's the PM for me. I've already done my work for the day and just raging on the internet. So it's a little bit different kind of experiences.
So there you go. So that's a bit behind the curtain there for everybody. So, going through the image, and I'd encourage people, if you're not driving or operating heavy machinery, grab the image from Mantic's website, which is the image of the War Games expansion, so you can sort of follow along what we're talking about, because it is probably going to help you with this. I'll do my best to describe it for the audio listeners. So this is essentially an update to the image in the web store, which shows the contents of the War Games pack. And this is the first time we've seen that, and it sort of expands on what we knew was already there. So I'm gonna sort of go through this in an order that makes sense for my kind of central thesis of what this is showing us. So there's going to be big alert up front. This is mostly speculation. I'll try and be clear where it's something you can actually see. A large chunk of this is speculation.
Yeah.
So on the bottom row, you have a number of items. So you can see 10 weapon cards, and those are the normal sort of weapon cards as they appear in the as they appear in the box game you will already have. It shows a heat wave and 2 M6 Spartan laser cards. You can't actually see the text of the Spartan laser cards. It also shows a corresponding sort of 10 item drop cards. Those are the ones that you use for spawning in the game today, or item drop tokens. Of what we can see, there's a Spartan laser, there's a pistol, there's a heat wave. We've got the stats for the heat wave. It's not particularly interesting. A plasma repeater. And then we know that there are a total of 10 items, and at least 2 seem to be Spartan lasers based on those cards. So that's somewhere between sort of 9 and 5 weapons, I would expect, based on sort of the past kind of card distribution. So that's cool. There's so many weapons there. What that makes really interesting, though, is that next to that is listed 38 weapon cards. No tokens, just the cards. And those cards are in a different colour. They're red. Now, they also show a Spartan laser, a needler, and a stalker rifle. Now, we don't have item drop tokens for needlers or stalker rifles today, which pretty heavily implies to me these cards aren't for picking up in the traditional way. The colour difference there being no tokens for some of them. So these look to me like the weapons you can equip to your Spartans as you build them in the war games, which is, there'd been speculation about how that was going to work. I think this is confirmation. There are no points cost listed on the card. You can see the full card for the Stalker rifle. There's no points cost attached to that, so that's presumably in the book. But these are It's interesting that these are sort of weapons that look like you equip to the side of a Spartan. Presumably that means they can be discarded because they're sort of separate, but there is no token for picking them up, which suggests that their transfer around the game will perform differently, potentially, or their ability to transfer around the game will perform differently to the traditional weapons. I'm just going to pause there, Dave. Did you, before I kind of ramble on, did that scan for you? Was there anything else you noticed with those?
Yeah, so I think it's clear that now we're going to have two different weapon colours. We're going to have the... I don't know what you call it. It's not blue, is it? It's like teal?
I would say teal. Yeah, I would go teal.
Teal and red. So the red ones we're suspecting is going to be part of your loadout that you can swap, and we're going to see ones that are traditionally have been with loadouts like the Stalker Rifle, Needler, probably the Commando as well, and other particular weapons. And then we're going to have the blue or teal cards, which feel like they're going to be the stuff you can pick up. So red cards, we're assuming you can't pick up. There's going to be a loadout, and probably when your Spartan gets knocked off the table, you don't get rid of those weapons. They just kind of stay with the profile, maybe, if that's really how loadouts work. And then we're going to also have the ones that you can drop. So I think now we're just going to have to make sure when we're talking about particular cards, we define which color they are, because I think that's going to really lead to what's going to be their usability on the table.
Yeah, and 38's an interesting number as well. So we have around 27 weapons we know of in the game today, excluding things like the grenades and the oddball. Right, it's about 27 current weapons, including the ones that are being released as part of this wave on models, and then we have we have sort of somewhere between, presumably somewhere between sort of 5 and 9 new weapons on the sort of the new teal cards we're seeing. So this could be, we don't know what the distribution of the 38 looks like. It could be there's basically one of everything that we've seen so far. Maybe some stuff we haven't seen so far, or this is a smaller set. But it's interesting. I'm also interested in if the number of cards given indicates a limit. So if for example this was, for argument's sake, 38 is about one of every weapon, does that mean you are limited to attaching no more than one of a given weapon to your fire team? So you can only have one equipped Spartan laser per fire team. I don't know. I'm speculating there very heavily based on an image that you can see online and come to your own conclusions. But I think that's that's really interesting.
And what we're seeing could also not be what we actually get as well. This is all just speculation or a bit of fun. So my guess is not all the items will have a red card associated with them, and specifically the weapons that are dropped. That you can't. There's going to be some of those weapons that you're not going to be able to build into a loadout. And that's why they're excluded. That's my gut.
The only thing I slightly disagree, because I think the only thing they've said consistently is points cost for every Spartan and weapon we've seen so far. Now, I don't. It'd be very interesting to see. I'm assuming they've not mocked up any weapons that like actually the Needler is a total fake out, right? And they've just put that in there to toy with us. I would guess they haven't done that, but I think it's an interesting. It's an interesting one. Maybe we'll do a bit at the end where I speculate what all of this means together for the game. But I'm just trying to go through the image to start with and sort of see what we get there. So we'll move on. So if you move then to the far bottom left of the image, there are marked some item cards. Those are like the pickup items in the game. They have the same symbols as the pickup items in the game: the active camo, the showered screen, and the drop shield. Though there are 32 of these red item tokens. Now, I don't know why you would have. It seems like red would be the color. Red, they're the same red as the 38 weapon cards that we've talked about. So, a reasonable working hypothesis is these are the 38. These 32 items are for attaching to Spartans at squad building. Again, we don't know. We don't know if they'll drop, but that's an interesting parallel. If red is the color for things that you're attaching. Yeah,
I agree with that, because I do think, and I think we've said this before, this expansion, I feel like, because of the success of the game, and I think it went a lot better than they anticipated, they're now setting up for the future. And I think this red and the kind of color scheme they're going for and the way they've kind of set up other things that this image reveals, I think they're future-proofing the game. And so I really do feel like there's a deliberate reason why the red of these items is the same red as those cards. And I think they're just starting to kind of really show a bit of a template of what to expect going forward. So I think you're 100% right with those items.
Yeah. So yeah, and that'll be interesting to see. I mean, again, we don't know what happens if you're killed and haven't used one. You know, do they drop? Do you respawn with them? I mean, I would probably err to the side that you're going to respawn with these every time, but we'll see. It'd probably be too messy. Potentially, there's the option to equip an item that is permanent or equip an item that is sort of one use, so you can get out every time you respawn or just the first time you spawn. I don't know. These are certainly interesting, and it gives us a flavour. So 32 item tokens. Currently in the editions of the game, you get 16 items, which is 2 each of the grenades. So 4 grenades, 2 explosive ammo tokens, and then another 10 items on top of that. 32 is double 16, so it's possible that
the math works. Yeah.
The math works. It's likely there's 2 copies of each item, or double the number of items you get today. Whether that also tells us something about item limits, whether you're limited to 2 of each kind other than grenades and explosive ammo, don't know. Again, just whether that's just the number of tokens they're giving you, and then it's up to you if you wanted to have a shroud screen on everybody or an active camo on everybody. That'd be your sort of choice. There's some very exciting things you can do with equipped items. The grapple, it looks particularly tasty if it's attached. Starting with grenades, we've talked about before, is fantastically powerful. Some of the other items, like the shroud screen or or things like the quantum translocator, are like very rarely very powerful, but when they are powerful, they're game winning. So it'd be interesting to see the sorts of decisions people can make. It's going to be quite, active cam would be very useful on some of these melee characters because it would let them charge without being snap fired. There's all sorts of combinations you can start to build. So quite interested to see how these evolve and how these impact the game.
And this is not taking into account of perhaps some keyword changes and rules that we may be seeing with this, because I've got a feeling that this might. It'll be very surprising if they don't change anything that's already out there in terms of the keywords and some of the items' abilities. We've seen on just based off this image, there is indications of some of that of those changes with some of those weapons. So it'll be interesting to see if we're seeing maybe changing some of those items as well.
It's possible. It's possible as well that there are new items we haven't seen, but we're sure. I mean, that remains, that remains to be seen. But yeah, certainly. So speaking of sort of new stuff and changes, then we see 2 special order cards. Now you can see a banished special order that you can read that is different to the current special order that they have access to, and behind that is a UNSC special order, which is a different title to the Spartan special order we can see today. So that suggests there are, it says pretty heavily there are new special orders. Now, interesting in squad building, do you pay for your special orders? Can you have more than one? Are you forced to choose one? I think that'd be interesting tactically. The internet has done the image is pretty blurry when you dial into the banished special order, but the as it appears on the card, it appears to be called Alliance, and then it appears to say basically you can use your special order dice if you are in an adjacent cube to a friendly model to remove the limit on taking and not being able to take the same action twice during your activation. So it would allow you to shoot twice or advance twice. Presumably crouch twice, although God knows why you would do that. There are sort of, it's probably quite good. It allows, on some level, it doesn't give you any extra actions. It's very clear. The entire second paragraph appears to be basically telling you don't get free actions as a result of this. But it would mean you could do something like special order in order to move, and then move again, and then potentially use an order dice to move a third time. It makes the special order dice probably about as good, probably a little bit better than a move special order dice or an extra shot order dice. So it is sort of, or probably about the same as an extra shot order dice. So it seems certainly to me to be quite a nice one for the banished there. I don't know if you've any thoughts on those, Dave.
It's interesting that they have moved to a faction special order rather than a fire team order, so that's an interesting change. I'm curious to know how the existing special orders fit in with this. How they're going to is it just going to be a case of one or the other, or is it going to be a case of that you get one faction order and one fire team order? So it'd be interesting to see whether we see how that basically is integrated. But I don't have much of an opinion how it's going to play out on the table. But it does feel like the Banished order kind of fits more closely to the Spartan special order as well. It's more aligned with what's already existing as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how that's all going to play out. I'm sort of, I'm really curious about how that's going to fit together. I don't have, I think in some regards having access to multiple special orders, particularly if you're forced to make a choice between special orders, I think will make an interesting list building decision, right? Like, do you want access to this thing or that thing? So I'm kind of curious as to where that goes. If you're limited to one, that can make it that will start to mean there are potentially quite different builds that become prevalent. So if you're thinking about, you're going to have the majority of players, at least for now, playing Spartans. If the UNSC special order is materially different to the Spartan special order, like access to Snapfire does inform a good chunk of why you build the current Spartan list the way you do. That might change, depending on what this UNSC special order is. So that there could be, you see sort of different builds emerging and different ways of building a fire team emerging down the line, different lines of which special order have you chosen, or potentially you're allowed multiples and you have to pay for them. But again, that could be, that could also be interesting. So, quite interested in that.
That's why I'm super curious of whether these special orders are actually different. So we are going to be seeing two kinds. So you could take potentially both of them. So you can do a faction special order, and then you've got a fire team one, which would be like the Sangheli mercenary one. And then you can actually take both of them, or if they are going to be treated as separate, that's when that's really going to start to get interesting of list building. So we need more information about that before I can make an opinion, really, whether it's good or bad, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to the bottom right, we can see new stat card designs. So there are the one down there on the bottom right is Master Chief, which you can see in full. It's a Master Chief card. They've played around a little bit with the stat locations and symboling. I'm not sure this really makes too much of a difference from the system they've got today. The move items are now on an icon. The armor is now on an icon as hit points, and then they just condense the sort of the range, fight, and save onto a smaller grid. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't take the opportunity to make Energy Shield an actual stat, given every model so far has got an energy shield. Similarly, on the weapon loadouts down the bottom, they've left ESD as a keyword rather than kind of putting it in as a stat. Again, I just sort of look at that and go, like, given those are really relevant, it feels like a missed opportunity for me to just sort of bring those more front and centre. But otherwise, this is a tidy up of the design. I don't know if there's a lot more to say on that, Dave, but
to push back on your idea about having it as an individual stat, only elites, Sangheli, and Spartans actually have those energy shields. Because if we're looking at brutes, they don't have them. Oh, I mean, and you did see some in Halo 3, but I mean, typically the majority of other, forces that you could say in the Halo universe don't really have energy shields.
True, but I think at the point all of the models released and announced have them, it might have been worth putting them on as a stat, but it's a fair pushback. The other thing I would just call out on here is the sort of there are some check marks at the bottom of the bottom and top of the cards, which aren't there on the current cards. So if you look at these cards, they have kind of four like bottom shape of a hexagon check marks at the top of the card, and four kind of rounded cube icon, slots at the bottom. of the card. Now these replace these replace what's there today. On today's, you've got like a pickup slot on the right hand side of the card and nothing else. But these are done in the same sort of design as that pickup slot. So what's possible is it looks like those 4 check marks at the bottom are the same shape as the check marks that as the top side of an item token. Similarly, the top ones appear to be the bottom of a hexagon, the same as a shield token, which indicates sort of that's where you would put your shield tokens, that's where you would put up to 4 item tokens, and then they appear to have a weapon slot or an item slot either side of the stat card, which potentially gives us a clue as to what you can pick up. Now, I can't read the text that's written. My eyesight is not good enough and the image is too blurry to read the text in either of those slots. It's possible I'm misreading them. I could potentially read the left one as close combat weapon, but that's a real squint at those. Yeah. It would appear to be 3 words to my eyes, but or close combat item, and then there's something on the right hand side. Again, I can't read that clearly enough. It could be pickup.
I think it's pickup. I think you're right on the. I think that one hasn't changed. So what it's showing on the existing card and that, I think it's the same. I think pickup the same. I think potentially the one on the left could be the loadout slot where you put your loadout. Yeah. But I mean, again, it's really hard to read.
The more I squint at it, the more maybe it is pickup slot on the right, but maybe it is close combat weapon, or maybe it could be something else. I'll be very interested to see what it is. It does sort of look like a C. Anyway, but it appears there are 2 pickup item slots, one on the left, one on the right, shield slots at the top and item slots at the bottom. What this might tell us is it's possible to have 2 things, which would be slightly different in your kind of pickup slots. But I think the access to 4 held items is an interesting concept as well. So whether you're allowed to start with 2 items and then pick 2 up in the game as you are now, or whether there's some other reason for giving us that, or if they're entirely cosmetic, who knows. Similarly, I think 4 shields is the current maximum because you can have Chief who has energy 3. Shield 3 and can get an overshield. So 4 is your current maximum. Would make sense to have 4 shield slots, but again, that's quite into the speculation of the card design. But that is a nice kind of pickup on there.
Mm. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely more of a redesign than adding anything. I think the only things that you've pointed out is the only thing they've really changed there. It's interesting they changed quite a lot. I mean, the biggest one from just a cosmetic point of view is the HP. So the HP is a lot more prevalent right there. I don't know why. Maybe that's just an easy way to track it. Maybe that's just so you can actually put
somewhere to put the tokens.
Your damage counter. Yeah, the tokens. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
I mean, I mean, what's weird to me is, and what's going to annoy me as a visual, because that's part of I've done a lot of visual design historically. What's going to annoy me is that the items you start with are red, and then but the character cards are in the same teal as the pickup items, which logically I would expect it to be the other way round, but that's just something that's going to annoy me. I expect the visual design change is probably useful in the sense that if it's obvious that you're looking at a War Games style card, you know that you're not, that if you're playing without, if somebody turns up to an event with the wrong... Okay, I'm going to pause and restructure my thought. Apologies, everyone.
It feels like a rant's coming. Come on, James. Hit it.
No. So, I've played a lot of games with stat cards, like the cards in front of you. These are not well-designed stat cards, but I'm not going to bore you all with visual design stuff. So, in games with stat cards, it's not uncommon. I'm conscious, I don't know if Mantic's done many games like this, so I'm not sure how familiar our audience will be with this. One of the interesting challenges you often have in competitive play is more casual players not realising which version of a card is the current version of a card, and therefore you get people with the wrong stats because the card that they're using has since been errated and they haven't realised. So making a significant visual change to the cards that come from War Games onwards that are sort of up to speed with the current way of playing the game means that you're not going to accidentally use your Recon Edition cards in a War Games game, which is kind of relevant because they're changing. Some stuff has changed on these cards that we can see. We can't see all of it. So I think there is something to be said for changing the visual design, because it will allow you to look across the table and go, my opponent has the wrong version of that Sangheili mercenary card. So that sort of that might in of itself also be useful.
That's a good point.
From a purely gameplay perspective, albeit these stat cards are better than they were, they're still not, as far as I can see, brilliantly designed, for reasons that are for another podcast about visual design. We should probably move on and talk about the cards themselves. You're then getting one card for each model released so far, and two of each for those of you with the Spartan edition, and one card each for the models that come in this pack. There are obviously models in another pack that aren't in here because they're released at the same time. The big thing you can see on these, the only card that's fully visible is a Sangheili mercenary with the plasma rifle. The plasma rifle has lost its long keyword. Everyone give it a wort in chat, because that means that gun is no longer the worst gun in the game. That gun is now actually for now it is a respectable weapon. Again, so that's good. So that also leaves the door open to other changes. So you can see that they've changed that the energy daggers on that Sangheili mercenary are now Sangheili fists, and you can see on all of the Spartans, they are now they're not armed with the combat knife they had before. They're armed with something that begins Spartan, and it looks like an F. So I think we're mostly reading this as Spartan fists. If you're the kind of player that enjoys the hilariously witty thing of talking about fisting during a game, just know that everybody hates you, and that is a war crime after about the first time you do it.
But don't worry, this won't make it worse at all. Don't worry, James. This will solve make it worse everything.
At all. One of my pet hates with gaming is look, we're sat here playing with toy soldiers. You don't have to make little wort noises and behave like a weird child while we're doing it. It doesn't add anything to our community, and it's often quite irritating.
Unless you are a child, and then that's okay.
Yeah, I'll let the actual children off. But so what's interesting, moving away from my soapbox, what's quite interesting in all of this is they're changing those weapons. I can't imagine that these weapons are better than the combat knife, which is already pretty good. It's interesting they're toning melee down, because certainly the Sangheili fist is not as good as the energy dagger, which is already not one of the better weapons. If the Spartans are similar, and I would expect so, because you can't really be better than that knife, that knife is already about as good as about as good in melee as a gravity hammer, a bit frighteningly. I think toning that down will have real implication for squad building. Which is quite interesting. Interestingly, the Brawler seems to have also lost their knife, which is worrying, because Brawler's already not very good. That's it's going to be interesting to see if the Brawler's got a little stat bump to account for the fact that they're no longer going to be particularly good in melee.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning just to remind everyone. So what we're referring to, for the Sangheili, the energy daggers are AP1. With Smash 1. Based off the new cards that we're looking at, Sangheili Fist, AP of 0. But they still looks like they still have the Smash 1. So that's what we're referring to as being toned down, so they lost that AP. Now, if you look over the combat knife, it's got an AP of 2 and ESD of 1. So if we're moving to Fist, we definitely, if we take what happened to the Sangheili mercenary going from 1 to 0, losing their daggers, if you lose your knife, the AP is probably going to go down to 0 as well, most likely. But I probably will keep still the ESD 1 based off what we've seen here, but that's worth just thinking about a little bit.
It matters significantly, I think, in terms of melee is already difficult to get caught in, right? This is going to make melee materially worse for most Spartans. Now that probably, assuming that's right, but I don't see the point in changing it and keeping it the same. So on the basis that stabbing someone with a knife is more dangerous than hitting them with a fist, which would make sense, I think you're already going to see the reduced power in melee, which will change things, right? So that means that probably stocks massively up on those models with a combat weapon. Assuming some of the pickup weapons are combat weapons, it's possible in those 38 item cards that the Spartan knife is in there, and potentially reasonably costed. You're looking to attach Spartan knife to people. Who knows? I think that the big thing from my perspective, as I look at it, is that is a significant change. Melee is already a bit dicey, and can you can generate into 3 dice on 3 dice kind of slap fights pretty quickly in game. Reducing the power of melee even further in a base setting means I think you're going to have to consider melee much more heavily in your squad building than you have to date. Which will be very interesting. It might make some of these items significantly. It might make some of the items we've seen and some of the models we've seen significantly better. Would be very interesting to see what that looks like.
Because I make cards of all the weapons as well, so if anyone even wants any spares, they can go over the wiki. They're not very well made, but if you get desperate, you always got that.
Yeah, I mean, don't joke about that. I mean, it's entirely possible that there aren't limits. There aren't limits placed on them by the number of cards they put in the box. At which point, you people may very well need additional items. So maybe look for some traffic there. We'll see. The other thing this does, I mean, one of the things that when we'd first floated the idea of attaching additional weapons to models at the point of sort of purchase, so during squad building,
your loadouts.
The thing that was your loadouts. The thing that was thrown at me was, won't that break make the Deadeye very broken, right? Because the Deadeye's got rapid transition or fast transition, so it can swap items. It can fire 2 guns when it fires when they fire the gun, right? That might be fixed in these cards, right? Also, things like the Zvezda is massively underpowered because the Zvezda is only move 1. That might change in here. Also, I mean, if you're going to attach a thruster pack to a Zvezda, that might also change the Zvezda's relative value, especially if they're cheap. So some changes here in stat line. We've already seen their willingness to change sort of stuff on the mercenaries. It's actually quite possible that this adjusts significantly the value of the models that you've got access to in your squad. So all bets are off, I think, as a result of this in terms of what's good and bad, at least at a kind of an initial level while we get those points costs.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and unfortunately we're not going to get our hands on it for at least a month or 2 from this point. You'll get your hands on it a lot quicker than I will. By the time it travels over the ocean, you probably would have PDF'd me a copy, hopefully. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what those little changes that are so crucial with the builds right now, how much will change. I'm interested in the keyword changes. I want to see how many changes we're looking in there, because it feels like it's definitely not going to be 0, but it'll be interesting to see how much they're going to change there.
Yeah, I mean, additional possibilities. I mean, one of the weird things for me is if they're going to allow you to have more than one weapon pickup, that would be kind of non-Halo. I don't know if Infinite's different, but certainly in kind of mainline Halo, one of the big evolutions in Combat Evolved was that you could only have 2 guns, right? So the idea that you could potentially look at this, maybe have more, is interesting. I wonder if we're going to see the other option is when you equip a loadout weapon, if that removes if you equip a ranged weapon, you lose your additional your current ranged weapon, if you see what I mean. So that this loadout is changing weapons rather than adding them. That feels less likely to me, but it's certainly a possibility. I think the only other thing. No, it's me stumbling over myself. I think probably the big game changer for me is if you can equip items, that means things that will fundamentally change the pace of the game. Equipping different weapons does give you things, and sort of does lead to some options, but that's broadly about adjusting how killy or the ability to pin of an individual Spartan, which you can do generally at the moment by picking a different Spartan. I think the items for me are where the big kind of capability changes come in. So, if you've got a grapple, the ability to just get a free cube of movement once before you respawn opens up some really interesting tactical plays. It makes the game much more rapid than you would think it does. access to things like active camo for melee weapon models, primarily melee weapon armed models, ups their utility quite a bit. There's quite a lot of this. The items will fundamentally change the game. I think if you got access to all of those from the start. I think the pace of the game is going to be interesting, because I think again, total speculation. I think with this kind of thing, I think the game starts a lot more rapidly, because you got more capabilities out the gate. Models are moving quicker. Things are popping off faster. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to fundamentally change the pace of the game. I think for the better. I think based on what we can see here, I'm really excited.
Well, one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, which has been teased about, specifically from Ronnie, is game types with no respawning as well. So yes, you make good points about how it speed things up, but you add in that element, things slow down quite dramatically despite these new additions. Or
speed up, depending on your point of view. I mean, I think that feels like something for another time. I don't think that's here. That's teased with Wave 3 and the Banished, and I think like that's a fundamental change as well. Like whether at that point we're talking about needing. I mean, I've said before, I think if without respawning, the game, like this game is killy enough that I think you either the game changes quite fundamentally. So I would go down. I think with that, you need more models on the board. I think that's quite a different game. That's quite a different experience. But the only thing we haven't talked about on this image, I mean, obviously there is a book, the Wargames book, which presumably has all the rules and explanation of what you need in it. And then there are 6 tokens I don't understand the purpose of. In the bottom left-hand corner, there are 6 tokens. There's a grey, a blue, and a red with a symbol I don't recognise. And I'm not clear what those are. I don't know if you've ever seen that symbol before, Dave.
No, I can't put my finger on it. I tried to do research, and unfortunately you can't Google a symbol. You have to put words into Google. So I couldn't really describe what it was. It looks like some kind of marker for a map type that I'm not quite sure. So I kind of Googled map types of seeing, when you catch the flag and so forth, and nothing really hit. So I'm not sure. It's really stumped me. But and just for those that obviously aren't seeing the image, it's saying there's 6 tokens. However, there's 3 different colors. There's grey, blue, and red. And the red is as in red team, as in just a different shade of red compared to what you get with the loadout reds that we're talking about. So it's just the typical blue side and red side colors as well. So it's definitely related to some kind of map type or game type. I can't put my finger on what, because we've really seen the big ones. So I can't think of anything that's missing, and I'm sure once someone mentions it, I'm going to click on it straight away. But it could be King of the Hill, for all we know. It could be just that's where the hill is, but yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I've found an icon. It's a game mode icon. Hang on. I'm finding this live because I hadn't, like a dumbass, I hadn't actually thought to Google it beforehand.
We don't do preparation. What are you on about?
We don't do preparation. Well, we do. That's the annoying thing, is we do a lot of preparation.
And that's why my jokes are so bad.
Yeah, this is it. I am now. It is an icon for one of the game types. Now, it is a Halo Infinite game mode icon. Now, can I now Google what it is? You're gonna have to cut some of this out, mate. Sorry.
No, it's all right. So while you're doing that, we'll talk about what we know. So what we know about the weapons that we're actually going to get. So we know we're going to get the G6 Spartan laser, the pistol, which looks like a reach pistol. I don't know whether they're just going to do a blanket pistol or whether we're actually going to get the specific model of the pistol. We also got the heat wave, also the plasma repeater, which just because James is typing in the background, he's the one that didn't actually know what it was and had to tell him what it was. But there's also one more weapon that we don't know of. So of the 5 pick-upable weapons, there's one more that we do not have confirmation. So it's going to be interesting to keep an ear out for that. Outside of that, the loadouts that we know that we're going to get with the models are the H165 target locator. That's a weapon that was in Reach. We're going to get the M45 shotgun, the concussion rifle, the grenade launcher, plasma launcher, And I think that's what all the new ones there. So it doesn't... My gut feeling is we're not going to get those in a card form of the red cards, but we might. So I just don't think we'll get some of those. Or we'll at least get some of those with the other fire team when we actually get that. So along with the normal cards that you get, you also get a copy of the red little loadout ones, if they are indeed loadouts. So I'll be very surprised if they don't include it, but also give the option to actually equip those weapons as well. So there is still a little bit we don't know, but we've kind of filled in all the gaps. So the only thing we really don't know is the specific rule changes that are going to be in the book. That one pick-upable weapon, and we kind of know everything else. So it's going to be interesting to see what gets dropped. And I don't think we're going to find out before it actually officially gets kind of revealed, which it sounds like at Adepticon, there's going to be something in person, either just the models or maybe even the rulebook itself. It sounds like it's going to come out, I think it's the end of March. Is it March? End of March or February? I always get confused now. When is the release date? I can't remember. It doesn't actually say on the website anymore of when the release date is. It just says pre-order. I think it's the end of March is when it actually officially comes out. Yeah, that's my gut feeling.
Yeah, it's end of March, early April. Right.
There we go. Yeah.
Total Control. It is the Total Control icon. It is a 12, and according to the AI overview on Google, Total Control is a 12 by 12 multiplayer game mode in Halo Infinite where teams compete to capture zones on a large map.
Typically big team battle. Just Googled it myself.
Yeah. Total Control is that's an interesting. That's an interesting one. I don't know anything about that.
It sounds like it's like you capture. I played this several times because I've been playing recently a lot of Halo Infinite because I'm trying to unlock the emblems that we talked about last time. So it looks like it's definitely like a capture the hill kind of scenario that you have to hold all 3 points. But I thought that we already had something similar to that already.
We already have. We do already have sort of the strongholds game type. Now, historically across Halo, there have been a whole heap of these sort of kind of King of the Hill type game modes. So is Total Control like is Total Control a new scenario we're getting in there? Who knows? Or are these for some totally different purpose? And I thank the listener for bearing with me suddenly deciding to Google something I could have Googled in the preceding week, live on the cast. But there you go.
That's right. That's fun finding that out. So it looks like it could be another variation on a game type, but it also could be like Oddball Reloaded. That this is going to be the next variation of maybe Strongholds that they're going to include these tokens into that map type of Strongholds or something like that.
Who knows? I mean, it's certainly if you go to if you go Google Halo game mode Total Control icon, this thing shows up, and Total Control is a game type in Infinite. The sources do seem to be a bit slender, but we shall find out as we go. Yeah,
they're pretty good at keeping the canon, so. Well, I would say we'll put our money on it's probably a new game type and most likely Total Control. But again, this is just us speculating. At the end of the day, what we're seeing online could completely change by the time we have it in our hands. So.
Yeah, cool. All right, and I think that does this section. So we'll be very interested to hear your thoughts, what we got wrong, what we got right. We'll no doubt do a bit of a recap when we've got more information. But 45 minutes is probably long enough for an intro into into speculating about one image on a web store. So
exactly.
I think Dave, we'd had a chat, and I think there's a bit of confusion in the community about an upcoming pre-order bonus and the law surrounding it. So we're going to use our law section to talk about that. Why don't you take that section away?
Yes, but you forgot the most important bit about ending the news segment.
Oh yes. No matter how many times you do that, that always surprises me, that noise.
Yeah, I love it. So, as I disclosed earlier before, the reason why this actually came about, we made this discovery, was some people were a bit bothered to find out that the weapon wasn't Cortana, because one of the pre-order bonuses people were offered was a picture. It just said counter, but it was the weapon counter. And because it looks like Cortana, and people are unfamiliar with Infinite, probably didn't realize it was actually referring to the weapon, which is a completely separate character than Cortana, but does look like Cortana. So we're going to quickly, just like many podcasts that have talked about Halo Flashpoint this week, we're going to break it down and basically explain really the differences. So before we do it, we're going to refer to James for him to tell me what he actually knows about the two. Do you actually know the difference?
No, having not played Halo 5, I mean, I'd assumed when I saw that it was the weapon, I'd assumed that was much like the elites refer to Master Chief as demon. I'd assumed the weapon was another name for Cortana in canon. I had no idea that those were two separate characters. So I'll listen with interest to what the difference is, because having never played Halo Infinite.
And it seems like a lot of people are in your shoes as well, based off what we're seeing on the Discord. So, as James calls him Cleric, or I call him Clive. I think I call him Clive. He clarified that it is definitely the weapon. So we'll start from. This is going to be a very abridged version. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty because it is a very confusing plot, and I barely understand it. So first off, Cortana and the weapon. Two different things. They are both AIs, but they're a completely separate thing. So Cortana has been in the games, pretty much every game except for ODST, but the weapon has only been in Halo Infinite. So if you haven't played Halo Infinite, that has all been Cortana, but if you have played a Halo Infinite, you'll know clearly the difference, because I think Cortana is actually purple in Infinite, and the weapon is actually blue, and that kind of helps you kind of separate the two. So most people will know Cortana's story. She was created by Dr. Halsey as with part of her I think DNA or kind of tissue or brain tissue or something like that. It was given to John 117, and she was basically given back to Dr. Halsey, and this is when Halo Reach happens, and you know how the Noble Six team is given Cortana to get back to the Pillar of Autumn, because she was actually given the coordinates of Halo at that time. And so she was given back to John once she got on the Pillar of Autumn. Then Halo 1 happens. Everyone knows what happened. Then Halo blows up. And then Halo 2 happens. And then Halo 3 happens. So Halo 4 is where things get a little bit messy. So, and have you played Halo 4, James?
I think I've played more Halo 4 than I realised, having seen some gameplay videos recently. But yes, I played a bit of Halo 4.
Perfect. So at the end of Halo 4, we know that basically there's the Didact, the big evil, or big bad guy. I wouldn't say evil. The big bad guy, John detonates the nuke, and then Cortana kind of protects him in this big shield, because she's kind of integrated with the ship and kind of saves him, and kind of implied that Cortana actually dies. In reality, what happened is that she's basically fragmented, and then she gets kind of thrown away through the Forerunner tech, and she kind of survives and kind of is really integrated to other Forerunner technology, and she starts to communicate to an AI called the Warden Internal, which is in Halo 5. Some people have probably recognized the name, and so basically she starts talking to the Warden Internal, and also gets connected with the Domain, which is basically a huge library of Forerunner history and knowledge. And she gets exposed to all this history. And through all that knowledge, she managed to cure the rampancy that she was going through, and then basically makes her immortal. So that was why she survived through Halo 4. By the time Halo 5 comes along, she had kind of convinced herself that she was to claim the mantle of responsibility. If you recall back in Halo 4, they mentioned the mantle of responsibility, that humanity was supposed to take the mantle. Now, the mantle of responsibility isn't a thing. It's like a philosophy. It's like the ones in charge. You guys are going to be the ones in charge, making sure the order of the universe stays true. And that's what the Forerunners assumed they were, basically. So Cortana, assumed she was going to be the one destined to claim this mantle, and then started to find ways of actually making that happen. That's basically what happens in Halo 5. Eventually, she makes an EMP and disables all this technology and convinces all these AIs to join her cause, essentially becoming what they call the created. And some AI turn against humanity, some don't, and it's basically a big kind of new war that takes place. And we don't get to play this in the game. So this is all happening between Halo 5 and Halo 6 Infinite. So Cortana's basically being a dictator, trying to take over the universe and going a bit crazy and throwing their weight around. Now, in reality, what was happening in real life is Halo 5 didn't go very well. Everyone hated the plot to Halo 5, and 343 Studios had to find an out. So they wrapped up this plot line outside of the games because no one liked it. So all of this is a little bit rushed and a little bit kind of messy, but this is why they did it, and they kind of just try to wrap things up really quickly. So after Cortana became the dictator, she basically asked everyone to either submit or die. And she reached out to Atriox, who was the leader of the Banished. And keep in mind, based off what we said earlier, the Banished is, even the Covenant couldn't control the Banished. They are still strong and powerful. And so she reached out to Atriox saying, hey, you either, surrender or, I'm going to kill you. And he obviously didn't surrender. And that's when she destroyed the homeworld of the Brutes, which is called Dosak, and basically destroyed it, flat out. And that's why that conflict escalated even more. So Atriox was, found Cortana, which she was chilling out on Halo 07. Atriox found them and basically tried to kill her. Now, at the same time, the UNSC was trying to, stop Cortana. And that's when they created what they call the weapon, is what we know. So the weapon was also created from Dr. Halsey, which is why they look the same. It looks similar because they are modeled off Dr. Halsey. And the weapon specifically was built to contain Cortana. So the weapon was going to infiltrate the Forerunner network, specifically Halo 07, where she was chilling. It was going to infiltrate there and lock her down so John 117 could come in and grab her, and they could just basically end this big conflict that Cortana had caused. So they managed to deploy the weapon. So the weapon managed to contain Cortana, and just trying to remember. They contained Cortana in the auditorium. That's what it's called, auditorium, and they basically just waited for them to come down and pick up Cortana. But the problem is the Banished had arrived, and so Atriox attacked the UNFC Infinity, is where John is. This is the start of Halo 6. If you watch the little cinematic at the start, this is basically this event. Atriox seemingly destroys the UNSC Infinity and looks like kills John, but doesn't really, but it looks like he did. And so he goes down and finds Cortana. Now, Cortana thought the person entering was actually John, and he was there to retrieve her. Turns out it was Atriox, and then she found out through Atriox that Atriox supposedly killed John, and she felt really, really sad about it. Consequences for your actions kind of thing. And she realized essentially how bad everything has gotten. She decided to essentially kill herself because Atriox wanted entrance to the silent auditorium, where a race called the Xelan was located, which we still don't really know what they are. It's just a species that the Forerunners have locked away, which supposedly are bad, but we don't really know. But locked them away. And then what Cortana did was she basically killed herself. She transported the ring to some other place in the galaxy. She destroyed part of the ring, which is why in Halo Infinite there's, it's all fragmented and broken. And she basically, killed herself. And then she made sure that the weapon, whose only job was to contain Cortana, and once she did, she was meant to kill us or to self-destruct. She made sure that the weapon couldn't do that. So John 117 would have a companion going forward. So Cortana did all that, and that's what the whole Halo 6 is about, is finding all these traces of Cortana and piecing all the story together. And so the auto delete didn't happen, the weapon survived, and at the end of Halo 6, the weapon finally chooses a name, but in classic cliffhanger fashion, she doesn't disclose it. It's left as a cliffhanger. So she's like, I've chosen a name, I know the best name to choose, and then that's when the game ends. So we don't actually find out what her name is it's all kind of mystery, but that's why the weapon and Cortana are two separate things. So Cortana technically in canon is gone, is deceased or dead. Some of her remains or spirit, I don't know what you call technology that's left a little bit behind, but she's still around in some regard. She, believe it or not, the Didac isn't actually dead as well, so she actually communicated with him. Laura's weird at this point, so I don't really know why all that, is connected, but either way, the weapon is separate, and that's why, people were confused as thinking Cortana and the weapon were the same, which they're not. So going forward in canon, the weapon is still alive, but Cortana is now gone. And we should, technically in the next game that we experience, we should find out what the weapon's actual name is. But at the moment, that's all we know. And after all that, James, did any of that make sense?
It did, and I think that's hopefully that's helpful to the listener, which and it's certainly helpful to me in terms of just separating these two things. As I've said before, I'm sketchy on anything really after Halo 3 lore-wise, and so by the time you get to sort of stuff that's happening in the modern era of the game, it's useful to have that. To have that content. We still haven't seen what that pre-order item looks like. It's a turn counter of some kind. So, but hopefully people will now at least know a bit of the lore surrounding it for those that have ordered one. So, all good.
And it's also said by Claire, which was quite interesting on the Discord, that they're not allowed to use Cortana. It makes us question of how much of the license can actually Mantic use, because he specifically mentions that. Because basically the dispute came from they saw the image and then people made a point that it's not Cortana. Then the person realized, oh, I thought it was. Why did you change it on us? And then there was a bit of argument that Mantic changed it on them. Which it was. I've done the wiki. I've been looking at the old images. They never changed it. They always called it the weapon, or always had the weapon's picture up. So no one changed anything. I think everyone just that didn't know the knowledge, kind of didn't know the lore, I should say. Just assumed it was Cortana when it wasn't. And reading through some of the responses, especially what Cleric has said, he said they're not allowed to use Cortana. So I don't know what that means in terms of going backwards in the timeline, or are we only going to be seeing only infinite assets in the game to begin with? So the brutes, most likely that we're experiencing in Wave 3, will be Halo Infinite brutes. So if you look at the Halo Infinite armors, things like that, you'll probably get a lot of reds because they're banished. There'll be banished brutes rather than Covenant-looking brutes, which are more red inclined. It kind of leads to maybe there's a bit of restriction on the IP that they can't really divert too much. Or it could be just the fact of with the big ticket players like Master Chief, like Cortana, they're not allowed to play with it too much, which might say there's a few, other big characters, let's say Commander Keys, for instance, if we ever want them on the table, there could be a little bit of restriction around that. So it's interesting, this whole debate. I mean, there was a big confusion for it. I don't think Mantic's at fault at all here. I think it's at fault of people just jumping to conclusions and not knowing enough about the lore before deciding. I mean, they did specifically say the weapon in some of the promo materials, so this is one of those rare cases that I fully will defend Mantic in this. They didn't do anything wrong, and I think everyone just, not everyone, but the ones that were unfamiliar with the lore kind of jumped on the wrong bandwagon.
Yeah, there's a small number of players who were confused, right? And we wanted to, and I hadn't passed that they were two different things. I thought it was a useful topic to cover. I mean, I don't want to spin this. This is not a huge internet controversy. We don't need, this is a few players being confused by this. I mean, I think for me, I can't get excited about a pre-order turn tracker that you have to pre-order directly. You get as a bonus if you pre-order directly from Mantic, and whether or not it's Cortana or the weapon, it has no gameplay benefit or difference. Historically, where you're dealing with a miniatures company working, using somebody else's IP, right? Through a licensing agreement. I've seen a few of these games over the years. Generally, it's not uncommon for pretty much everything needing to loop back via the parent company, particularly for larger organisations like, ultimately this goes back up to Microsoft. I've seen this with the various Disney properties that are licensed out to gaming companies. It is quite common for there to be a control over what you can and can't do with the license and with the IP, which makes sense if you want to protect your IP as a large organisation. You want to protect what you own. So there will usually be a loop back to say, we want to do this. Can we do that? There was a famous instance in Marvel Crisis Protocol, which licenses Marvel from Disney for a miniatures game with the character M'Baku, who was very popular in the movies. Traditionally, Disney only allow Atomic Mass, who make that game, to use characters as they appeared in comics for various reasons. Now, the challenge with M'Baku from the comics is that is not a character you can create a miniature of in 2025 or 2024 when they did this. That would be a phenomenally unwise choice, and for very good reasons. Listeners can figure that out on their own time. So they had to work specifically with Disney. I mean, okay, the cue is that was a comic of its time and was incredibly racist. So the character obviously couldn't be used, but they did want to use M'Baku because that's a character that's very popular from the movies in his current Marvel Cinematic Universe form. So they had to get special permission from Disney and work explicitly with Disney on the creation of a character that was not the character from the films, but was also much, much closer to that version of M'Baku, that was something that was fit for consumption and something in the modern era. So it wouldn't surprise, there's a lot of these things where the licensor will kind of control what you can and can't do to protect their own IP and their own, and their own brand. So this is probably one of the things where we may get to Cortana at times. If suddenly there's a new Halo game coming up and Cortana's a key player in that game, wouldn't be surprising if they then said, okay, well, yes, use the new Cortana. I know she's supposed to be dead, but nobody's ever really dead in media.
That's true.
The
Didac's still alive, and he died in 4 apparently.
Yeah,
I found that out through this.
Yeah, so it's entirely possible. Or they decide to go and do a remake of Halo 1 or some sort of prequel or interstitial game that's set between, I don't know, Halo 2 and 3, or set between 3. At some point when Cortana's alive, Cortana's a core part of that. It may well be at that point they get the rights to use her. I mean, we've been waiting, people who play Marvel's Crisis Protocol have been waiting forever to get Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four, because they're the big thing that's not currently in it. There's a Fantastic Four movie coming up. Doctor Doom is coming up in the MCU. It would not be surprising if Disney go, right now, do it now, to Atomic Mass and tell them, now is the time to do those models, because it all ties in. So... watch this space. This isn't really uncommon ground for licensed properties. They'll want you to focus on things that they feel add to the brand and move away from anything historically that may detract from the brand.
Just to add on there, there are rumours that they're remaking the first Halo again in the Unreal 5 engine. So we could be seeing that in the next couple of years of that coming out. It could line up perfectly with this game as well. So yeah, I can see exactly. I don't know how much synergy I guess there is between the two and what Mantic's plans are, because it does feel like once we don't really know what's happening after we get this Brute wave out. The two we're assuming it's wave 3 and 4 are going to be Brute centric, but past that we kind of really don't know which way it's going to go here, and that's what's a little bit exciting, because If we are a little bit pigeonholed for now in the Infinite universe, there's only so many places you can go, because the Infinite didn't really go too much further other than Brutes versus Master Chief, basically. Yeah, you could go Grunts, you could go Drackles, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting what happens after that point.
Absolutely. And that, I'm very keen to see what happens in this wave, and then how sort of future releases play on from there. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that was a load of information for today. Do you have any? Actually, we'll go over a few comments from Mel as well. So we've had a few. Have you managed to read that comment that we have got posted in the last episode about the US National event?
Yeah, I did see that. I don't know if you want to take the listeners through it, and we can have a quick chat through that one.
Yeah, so Brad Parsons 2256, he asked a question on the last episode. It was answered, but we might as well say it here. For the US Nationals events, did you confirm that the 4 weapon drops placed during the setup refers to the weapon drop markers or the weapon tokens? For example, it may be saying place 4, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8 weapon drop markers on the W spots per game mode. Thanks. So I'm pretty sure they didn't initially clarify it.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, with something like that, I would always say refer to your TO, right? Like the tournament organizer will sort of tell you. It sounds, I don't know if you saw an official answer to that. I read it as place 4 weapon items. I could very well be wrong. I'm not flying to America to participate in that event, so I would be, I'd be hesitant to answer. I certainly felt like when I read the packet, I read it as 4 weapons dropping, not just the spawn points for the weapons, but if that's unclear in the pack, I'm sure that'll be clarified on the day. Dropping 4 weapons at the start of the game does seem a little bit crazy to me, but we'll figure that out, I'm sure.
Mike Slacks replies back. He read the Adepticon pack and thinking it means place each of the 4 drop markers randomly on the map, and he said a few things, but Brad Parsons come back and said, yes, that's correct, thanks. I also confirmed this with Mantic. It's 4 weapon drop markers, 1 weapon token to start round 1. So it's also good to see that Mantic is offering to answer those questions when people get stumped, and it looks like it was only a day they had to wait to get his answer from Mantic. So it's good to see that the correspondence to questions like that is definitely good at the moment.
Assuming of course that the person on the internet has the right information. But yes, which is always a high risk maneuver. But certainly interesting. So interesting to see that pack. I'm be interested to see how the results of that event go, albeit as those events are happening prior to points, as I understand it. Probably of limited use as we move into the sort of the new era of the game.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I guess we'll wrap things up there. Any final words there, James?
No, just very much looking forward to the points, and thank you all for listening.
Yeah, so if you do want to email us, please email us at manticuniversepodcast@gmail.com. Also follow us on Facebook, YouTube. Definitely like and subscribe, all that fun stuff on YouTube. It does help. And even leave a comment, because we'll read it out and gives us a little bit of a discussion point for the next episode. We've also got a Patreon if you want to chuck us a buck, but also on Discord if you want to reach out to us. There's a bit more conversation happening there. I think a lot of people are putting their paint jobs there, and a few people are chucking out some questions about the rules they're trying to clarify as well. So we're definitely trying to build a community here, and definitely reach out if you feel like it. So thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.